I'm ready.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Christina. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so excited for
Ah,
today.
me too. So I just got off a call with my child's therapist, so I'm a little bit emotional. So if I
No,
start crying today, uh,
it's okay. It's
I'm
okay. I
already
totally
stirred
understand.
up.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
I have three beautiful boys. They are 7, 11, and 12, soon to be 13.
Okay. Okay.
How
That's
about
great.
you?
I have two kids. My daughter's 17, so she's embarking on her last year of university, and I have a son, he's 12, and he's just entering middle school. So I have one that's finishing and one that's just starting.
Oh, God bless you. Oh my gosh, you don't look like you
Yeah.
can have a 17-year-old.
Oh, wow, thanks. That's a compliment.
Beautiful.
Thank
So
you
we
so
both
much.
have 12-year-old boys.
We do, we do. It's a shame we live so far away. We
I
could have gotten
kn-
together.
I know. And where are you again?
I'm in Greece. I'm in Eastern Europe. And how about you?
I'm in Massachusetts in the United States.
Wow, quite far away, quite far away. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for for wanting to speak to me today about childhood trauma.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I actually I like talking about that subject. I'm informed with that subject, and I think it's a subject that's going to be relatable to a lot of women out there, and a lot of single moms. So let's jump in. Let's talk
Yeah.
about childhood trauma.
For sure. And like you said, I'm also very well informed with this subject because
Hmm.
I endured trauma in childhood. And my children have endured trauma, and which
Hmm.
is why I've finally got them into therapy. And and it hasn't been easy. So, what has your experience with trauma been?
Um, my experience with trauma growing up, it took me, I've also been in therapy for years, right? So that was something that was pushed by my mom at some point when I think I was 17, 16 years old. And, we had some stuff going on in our house, mainly due to my dad. And she's like, you need to go to therapy. So my first experience was when I was about 16. And honestly, after all these years, it was the one thing that actually saved me and taught me what really went on in my childhood, how that really affected me, and how it's affected my adult life and my relationships. I focus on relationships as a coach, but it really affects everything. Just a little bit of a background. I grew up with a father that was a very angry man, kind of like, have you heard the term? I hear this term thrown around, a rageaholic. Have you heard of
Yeah.
that before?
Yeah, like the Incredible
Yeah,
Hulk.
exactly. Incredible Hulk, very unstable, very unpredictable. From one, day he could be like, I wouldn't say he was a good father, but he was kind of like, okay, normal, coming home from work, blah, blah, blah. And then, the next moment he would just explode out of thin air. So I mainly grew up in a very angry household. And I remember one of my experiences was that when we would sit down, so I'm just going to close that, my dog. Um, we couldn't sit down as a family without arguing at the table. It was
Mhm.
just screaming, screaming, screaming all the time. Um, and my trauma does go a little bit deeper into other areas, like physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse.
By your
And my
dad?
mom, sorry,
By your dad?
by my dad, yes,
Mm,
mainly by my dad.
mm.
And my mom, she did the best she could, but she was very focused on my dad. So it was kind of like walking on eggshells, like, oh, be careful, you can't say this to him because you're gonna set him off, or you can't say that. So I grew up, living on eggshells around a man, a father that was very volatile, and very emotionally unavailable, physically
Mm-hmm.
unavailable and emotionally unavailable. So, um, and my mom was, like I said, very focused on my dad. So I've also been through a 12-step program, CODA, which teaches you about codependency in relationships, right? So my mom was very codependent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the messages that she didn't directly, you get these messages from parents. Some of them are non-verbal, but it's just this energy or this vibe or this message that they give off that, what I was taught or how I interpreted it as a child was that the man is the most important, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to do everything to keep your man happy,
Happy. Yeah.
and kind of like be this woman that's kind of like in this service mode. You're there. This sounds really awful and really misogynist. You're there to almost like service him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And which meant that my needs were not important. And that's how I felt as a child. I'm also a middle child. So, I have an older sister and a younger sister, and I was kind of like that really quiet child that
Mm-hmm.
was the invisible one that, you could just throw me in a corner and forget me for 5 hours. That was me. So I felt very, very alone and very just misunderstood, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of that awkward child, kind of very, and then it kind of manifested in my teens, kind of socially awkward, very, very shy, very withdrawn. Um, I was a late bloomer, very, very afraid and shy around boys. What else can I share?
Well, that's crazy because like I was a youngest child and I have my own, I was a scapegoat, but my middle boy, because like I mentioned, they've been through their own childhood trauma, and my middle boy is very much like that. And I'm happy that they're getting therapy now. It took me about 2 years to finally get him therapy because there was like this huge wait list. But
Mhm,
um, yeah, he's not socially awkward, but he's very quiet, and the way he talks, it's different than other kids. And I never thought of it, I knew I never thought of it because he was the middle boy, or because of I always thought it was kind of like a confidence thing, like he needs, I thought it was because of his dad not being around or all the stuff that we've been through. um
mhm,
I, it's funny to hear you say that was kind of like your experience as well.
mhm. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I think it's great that the children are getting therapy for such a lot from such a young age. It makes them aware of certain situations, and it also gives you the power of choice. Therapy gives you the power of choice because you're aware that that's not. It's kind of like we've been programmed living in our family of origin, and we're programmed to actually make certain choices in
Yeah.
every area, and um, it affected my self-esteem a lot and my self-worth, and that kind of spanned out to even my work. It took me after I'm 48. I started my coaching business when I was 35, so it took me years to figure out what I really liked and what I
Right.
really wanted to do. It just affected everything, the self-esteem, right? I think that for me was the most.
But were you
um,
doing therapy since you were 17? Like, has that been a consistent thing
it
throughout your
has
life?
been a consistent thing. It has been a consistent thing, and I was lucky enough to found a therapist which was very close to her. I've been with her for over 20 years, and she actually helped me through my divorce as well. Um, and at some point, she's like, "You don't need any more therapy." She said, "Just take action." She's been with me since every stage of my life, since 18 years old. So I don't actually do therapy anymore, but I've done a few, self-help programs and some coaching programs, and I always like to keep myself informed. It's kind of
You
like
think
a
you're do you think you're codependent on your therapist?
could be definitely. Does it sound like it? Yeah, she was almost like what I was gonna say it, but I bit my tongue, like a mother figure to me, because my
Yeah.
mom was kind of
Oh,
like emotional and available as well.
oh,
Um, but yeah, I just it was time to let that relationship go, but she did help me a lot. How
that's
about you?
I just started therapy. It's funny because I've been it was my normal my entire life, my childhood, all of the abuse, how I was treated. I knew it wasn't the way other families were, and I would see other families and want my family to be like other families, but I just figured that was just how my family was, and I dealt with it for many years. And then I got into bad relationships, and I figured that was myself, like that was just my normal. Like I didn't realize that there was a connection about
Hmm.
with how I was raised, and the choices that I was making in the relationships that I was forming. And I mean every relationship, even friendships, and
Right.
then I met my children's father, and again, that relationship, I jumped in an attempt to escape my home life. And
That's
but
what
he,
I did.
yeah,
I also did that. Sorry to interrupt you.
it's
Yeah, I
okay.
left home and I just got married. Oh
Yeah.
wow.
And it was more of like he was the lesser of two evils. I had seen a lot of red flags, but he seemed like a nice person. So when I married him, it was just I instantly started to realize that I made a mistake, because he had a lot of qualities that showed that he wasn't apt to be a husband, and much less like a man in our lives, but I went forth with it because again, I was very religious, and I had already gone through a previous relationship prior to that marriage, and that failed, and that was like very violent, and that was very traumatic for me too. So part of me was I refused to go through it again, so I conditioned myself to just survive it and to become better. I just conditioned myself in that relationship that it was that I was the problem, and that I just needed to be better. I needed to be a better human, a better woman, a better wife, a better daughter. I was just not good enough in any way. And so, and everything that I did to be better for so many years, um I pursued careers. I just like I was a perfectionist in every way. But the relationship never got better. It just got worse and worse throughout the years,
Hmm.
until the day that I realized it wasn't going to work. And and I prayed for so many years for God to make things better. And even though I knew in my heart that the answer was that things would be better outside of the relationship, I still had a hard time. I had convinced myself through the religious views that I needed to stay and try every route possible. And I did.
Hmm.
And then when I figured that I had tried every route possible and it was still not working, and I looked at my children and they were starting to obtain traits of the abusive behavior, which at the time, again, I didn't know it was abusive. I just thought it was just bad behavior, or it was just my normal. That's just, it was
Right.
the normal behavior, but I didn't like that normal, and I wanted to change the normal for my children. So I knew that their dad wasn't treating me with respect and with dignity, and it wasn't so much of the way he was treating me, it was what he was teaching them to treat me. And so
Mm.
I refused to allow my children, three boys, which were going to be three men, to grow up to have those behavior traits, not as long as I was their mom and I was responsible for their lives and their future. So I made the decision to leave, and it was a process. It wasn't easy. And after leaving, it was abusive. Still, it got worse and worse, but I still did not realize it was abuse. I did not realize it was abuse until I started to see that my children were not themselves. Like, they were emotionally and psychologically and being all types of abuse from their father. And it was more blatant and more direct. And so I was like, they were being used as leverage to torture me, to abuse me, and to mistreat me and manipulate me into doing things. And um then one day I came across like an article about covert passive aggressive narcissists. And when I read the article, I I saw my entire life written on there. I said, this is everything that I've gone through in all of these years, and this past over a decade in this relationship.
Mhm.
And for the first time, I felt validated, and I knew that I wasn't crazy, because I had thought for all those years that I was just making stuff up in my head. I thought I was just crazy.
Mhm.
And I felt validated, and I cried and I bawled. And that is when I started to understand and process that what I was going through was not normal. It was my
Mm.
normal, but it was not normal behavior, and that it was actually abusive behavior. But even after that, it still took me time. It still took me time to process it and to understand it. And I didn't start getting therapy until about 2 years after, like, really and so that first moment when I say, wait, this is not normal, this is passive aggressive narcissism, covert passive aggressive narcissism. um and it's still 2 years later, when I had certain incidents happening with my dad and my family. It was just, I was like, I've had enough. I was doing so much for so long, carrying so much weight, doing so much running around, trying to be the best that I could be at everything, and never being good enough for everyone. And I was like breaking down. And when I looked at my life, I played a scene. It was like a movie scene that went from my childhood all the way to that moment in my life. And I looked and said, looking for a healthy relationship. And I realized that all of my experience from childhood had been toxic relationships. I had not
Mm.
had a healthy relationship in my entire life. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that felt like, because all of my life since childhood, this had been my normal. And when I realized that at 35 years old, almost 36, or I had just turned 36, when I realized that, I fell apart. I fell apart. It was like the dam broke in me, and I couldn't put it back together. And I literally got into the most depressed state of my entire life, and I couldn't function as well at home. And that's when I realized I needed to get help. And so that's when I started to get therapy. And in therapy, I got diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder, with
Oh,
anxiety,
wow.
depression. And that was a process for me, because I was 36 years old, and in my entire life, all I ever wanted to do and to be was good. I wanted to be a good girl, a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, a good student. I wanted to be a good Christian, but I was never good enough. So in all of my life, when I realized, and I had the PTSD diagnosis, I had a whole wave of emotions come through me. It was anger, that my entire life I had been going through all of this BS, and led me to get PTSD, to get that bad. So I was angry. I was kind of like in disbelief and in shock that I could have PTSD. I mean, I'm in the army, for God's sakes. Like, usually you hear this from war veterans, and I got
Mm.
PTSD from civilian life.
Well, that shows the extent of the impact of the toxicity and the abuse
Yes.
had on you. And I'm familiar with PTSD. I mean, victims of sexual abuse, physical abuse get PTSD. I think I even had, I've never been officially diagnosed, but I definitely feel that I had a trauma response at some moment in my life. I would just, in certain instances, because my father just instilled fear,
Mm,
that he would scream in my face,
mm.
right? And I used to have relationships like that with men, and I would just freeze. I would just go, how fight, flight, freeze when we're
Yeah.
in adrenaline. I would just freeze,
Yes.
and that freezing would just make me shut down completely. I couldn't talk. I couldn't
Yeah.
move.
Yes.
Um, and that's a trauma
Yeah.
response. It's a
Yes.
trauma.
Yeah.
What my therapist taught me was you gotta, and I used to disassociate a lot.
Mm.
Um, disassociate, like you're not in the present moment. You're kind of somewhere
You kind of
else
go
in your
away.
head.
You kind of zone out. And it's like,
Right.
and I would have that, like when I would relive and I would retell a story, and all of a sudden I was there. I'm telling the story as if I'm living it, like I'm literally there
Right.
in the
Right.
moment in my mind. And I was constantly retelling these stories again and again and again and reliving them with all the feeling and the emotion that went with them.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that led to my diagnosis as well. But again, when I had diagnosed, after getting over the anger and getting over the all of the shock and everything, I had a wave of, now I understand. Like now I understood myself better, because I had a lot of those triggers, like you said, and I didn't understand why. I just thought that there
Exactly.
was something
Right.
wrong with me, and I was trying to fix that. Like I've been trying to do professional or personal development for years, and I couldn't meditate. I had all this anxiety. I had a hard time thinking positive thoughts and
Mhm.
getting rid of all of these negative thoughts in my mind, all these reliving these negative cycles. I had a hard time just like I just had a hard time. Like I had a hard time with just reading, focusing on reading. And I'm an avid reader since I was a child. And I
Mhm.
couldn't focus on reading. I would reread the same thing like 20 times, and it was hard to concentrate. So things that I
Right.
used to be able to do really well before, I couldn't do them anymore. And so I was like, oh, I get it. So I started to learn more about PTSD, what caused it, how the brain is physically different. And then I started to validate my experience, and I started to say, okay, there's a reason why I have these physiological responses. So I don't have to judge myself anymore for feeling or thinking this way. And when I started to go through that understanding of my diagnosis, I started to heal better, because I
Mhm.
wasn't judging my process anymore.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just thinking of what triggers the beginning of healing, because healing, for me, healing has been a journey. It's a journey of self-development, like you said. So I think the healing is triggered when you have that aha moment, when you read that about covert, because my ex-husband is a covert narcissist. um, the shaming, the guilt, I
Yes.
couldn't do anything right, the
Yes.
criticism, the gaslighting. Are you familiar with
Yes.
gaslighting? The narcissist's favorite. So they make you feel like you're crazy.
Yes.
Um,
Like, yeah, he would tell my ex would tell me that I was crazy. He would tell me, and so
yeah,
he would call me sick in the head. Like, you're just making
right.
stuff up. You're crazy. You're sick in the head. And I
Yeah,
literally
that,
thought that I was making stuff up.
right, right.
For a long time,
It's
I
like,
would say, am I making it up? Because he seems like he's such a nice guy. Because one moment he was this way, but then the next moment he was really nice. So I would be confused. I'm like, wait a second, like, so maybe I am the bad guy because I got angry or I got upset or I said something wrong, and that's why he acted that way? Or did he act that way and then I got upset? Or did I get upset? Like, it would just be this crazy cycle. So for a long time, I literally thought that I was crazy and that I was making stuff up, and I had to that's why I was reliving a lot of this experience again and again in my mind, because I had to tell myself that I wasn't crazy, that I actually lived it, and I had to validate. That was my way of validating my experience by reliving this stuff. and telling myself this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But am I crazy? No, because this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. That's kind of the cycle that I was in. Like, am I making
I'm
no?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this. Yeah, I absolutely understand. It's that who's the crazy one? It's like, it's like a very simple example is like the wall is white and they're telling you, no, no, it's black, but you can
Yes,
see that the wall is white,
yes,
but they're like, no, no, you're crazy, you're blind, you can't see the wall is black or whatever. So they're making you crazy, and then what happens is you start to doubt yourself,
yes.
right? But my and this goes back to childhood abuse. My father was a narcissist,
Mm,
so when I started to come kind of begin, the healing and start to learn a little bit more of, oh yeah, that's what happened to me. That's how I used to be made to feel when I was young.
yeah.
So it all ties down, right?
That's
Um,
right. That's right. And that's when I had that realization that since my childhood, all I've had are these toxic relationships because my mother, she was not covert. She was very, very overt. Like she was very kind of like your dad. Like she'd be okay one moment and then the next moment she'd just flip out and she'd say very hurtful things out of nowhere. It was very constant though. Like we'd be having a good conversation and then out of the blue she'll say something extremely hurtful, or she'll do something extremely hurtful. Or back when I was younger, she used to beat me out of nowhere. Like she would get upset at my brother and my sister because she had relationship issues with them, and
mhm.
I just happened to be around. And then let's say that like I put my cup on the table and she'd flip out and beat me for it. And then I wouldn't understand what
What
happened. That
happened?
was my
What did you do?
childhood. That was my childhood as well. So it's so funny how we then got ourselves into relationships. It's like we were reliving this like childhood
Yeah.
experience. How do you think that is?
Well, I've done a lot of reading, and so what happens is that we try, and this is kind of like a subconscious. That's why when you start becoming aware, kind of like the consciousness um, or the awakening, right? So you're not just walking around life like a zombie without
Yeah.
knowing why you're choosing this and where it's coming from. It's kind of like we're programmed to reenact what we had in our childhood. So if our parents' relationship was toxic or abusive, we want to duplicate that because
Yeah.
that's been there are role models. Basically, like I can put it in very simple terms, there are role models. So I think that's what people think is the right thing. That's been their example,
Yeah.
right? And when you've been programmed and spoken to a certain way and treated a certain way, and you look at your parents and I don't know, they're fighting or they're loving or whatever the difference may be, that's what you're going to look for because you don't know anything else. And a lot of people just and like myself, I just chose a man. I remember because I had a lot of shouting
Mm.
and aggressiveness, I chose a man that was the complete opposite. Never, ever, I've actually never seen a person that has never raised their voice.
Mm.
I mean, I even shout at my kids sometimes, and I feel
Yeah.
so bad. But my ex-husband, never raised his voice.
Mm.
However, if he wanted to make you feel this small,
Mm.
it was just his tone,
Yeah.
the way he would look at you,
Yeah.
and it would just feel so hurtful without ever raising his voice. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Or the
what
or the lack of
happened?
interaction, the ignoring. In my case, it was like he would just ignore my existence. He would just pretend I wasn't even there.
Well,
Or he would
that's
do that
also a
to my
form of
kids.
abuse,
Yeah.
the shutting out. Yeah.
Yeah, he would shut me out. He would do that to the kids too. Like he would just ignore. And I could be talking to him and he would just look away and he'd be, I'm like, but look at me when I talk. He was like, I'm listening. And I'm like, is he really, is this the way he interacts? Because let me observe. So then I'm observing how he interacts with other people. And I see that with other people, he interacts with them normally. He looks at them in the eye. He has engaging conversations. And I'm like, no, he's only like that with me. So this was like that for years. But I think another reason why we repeat this in our adult life is because every human being is born with a need to be nurtured and loved. And in childhood, when that is not fulfilled, it's like an empty cup. It's like an empty cup that never gets filled. So when you grow up, you are looking for your mom and your father's love and affection that you never got in childhood.
Yes, that as
And
well.
then
Yeah.
you end up in a relationship with somebody that in one way or the other, you attract who you are and what you know, like you said, subconsciously. You don't make a conscious choice. I'm gonna marry like my mom, or I'm gonna marry somebody like my dad because they abuse me. I don't want that. But you subconsciously do attract them in order to fill that void, because narcissists tend to love bomb. So in
Yes.
the beginning of the relationship, they give you all the world. They fill that void that you feel was so empty, that cup that has never been filled since your childhood. And this narcissist comes in and fills it. But then once the cup is full and overflowing because you've been love bombed, and then the narcissist shows his true face and starts abusing you, now there's a trauma bond. But this is your normal now, because when you were a child, at least in my case, I remember that all I wanted was my mother, my father's nurturing and approval.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
so that when they mistreated me, I quickly forgot what they did to me. I quickly would forgive them because all I wanted was their love and affection. So this happens in a relationship. When you form a relationship with a person now that resembles or it's repeating that of childhood abuse, and now he's not filling your cup, but he filled your cup once, so you know that the potential is still there. He gave you that love once, but it's empty now, and he's just mistreating you. But you let it go because you want him to fill that cup like he once did. And so that's the trauma bond. And you kind of live in that illusion of, once he was able to give me this, or this one time he was nice to me, or he said these kind words to me, or he did this one nice thing to me. And so you focus on that need that you still have. And so you oversee that he's also treating you like shit. He's treating you like garbage. He's putting you down.
Right. And
Because
you kind
that's
of
your
excuse
normal.
it. Yeah, you excuse. You're like,
You
like,
justify.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's nice, but he has this one time that he's really sweet, and they
Yes.
kind of just do it like to give you a little bit to hook you in a little bit more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then once they have you hooked in, then it's like the same again.
Yeah.
And it's very like my experience of the trauma bond. It's very like highs and lows, almost like an addictive thing. Like
Yeah.
there's highs where he's like giving me a little bit of attention. It might be crumbs. That's what it
Yes.
felt like. At the time, I
Breadcrumbs.
thought it was wow, but
Yeah.
now it's like I was being breadcrumbed, and I thought
Yeah.
it was like the most special thing,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah, and it really wasn't.
And it's really what it is. All it is your childhood need to be fulfilled, that childhood desire to get that nurturing from your parents that you didn't get, that you still have. So the way out is to nurture that in a healthy way, not looking for it in other relationships, because you're going to keep on getting into unhealthy relationships. So it's going deep inside. And this is what therapy is so helpful, because you can go deep inside and talk about the pain and the anguish of that childhood trauma and find ways to nurture that and to heal that inner child, so that now that you have this, you're whole again, you won't need it to be nurtured by somebody. If somebody treats you like garbage, you'll be like, that's it, red flag, you don't deserve me.
There's no way that a person would
That's
accept that.
cool. Yeah, you
Like a
wouldn't allow
woman with self-esteem and feeling whole and worthy within herself would ever accept being treated
Yes.
like that. And I
Yes.
was accepting awful behavior. I was like a doormat. I had no identity. And I remember I used to go from relationship to relationship. Um, and I used to mold myself. I don't know if you did this, into him. Like if
Yeah.
he liked soccer, I
Yes.
liked soccer.
Yes. Like kind of wanting to please them.
Right. Have you seen the movie Runaway Bride with Julia
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes. Yes.
When
Yes.
she's molding herself into each, she's like, oh, I like those kind of eggs. But
Yeah.
no, with this boyfriend, I like that kind of egg.
Yes. She likes
That
mountain
was me.
climbing. Yeah. Yes.
And it's like, wait a second, what do I like? What do I
Yes.
actually? And I never knew what a healthy relationship felt like. I didn't
Yes.
know how to be in one, which also brings me back to I needed to heal myself before I could be in a relationship.
Yes. And this is a good segue for our next talk about
Yeah,
relationships, right? And I think that
right.
we could, there's like so much that it's affected, like you said earlier, a lot of our decisions, every decision that we make in our lives, financial decisions,
Uh-huh.
relationship decisions, your interaction in your workplace. Some people deal with a lot of bullshit at work because again, like they have an inability to create boundaries, and all of that stems from childhood trauma. So I'm just so excited that we met today and we spoke about this, and that we're going to be meeting again to talk more
Me
about these
too.
topics.
Very exciting. I'm also very excited to talk about other areas that childhood trauma affects, and absolutely affects everything. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So for those of you guys that are watching this series, this is Single Moms Talk, and today's topic is childhood trauma. And my name is Rebecca Elizabeth. I'm a single mom of 3 beautiful boys, a trauma survivor, and a life coach.
And I'm Christina. I'm also a single mom of 2 beautiful children, divorced, and I am a relationship coach. And I work with single moms as well, and I kind of help them navigate their healing process. So the goal is to be in healthier, more fulfilling relationships, and that's a good way to start of creating that healthy relationship and that loving relationship with ourselves first, right? So we can share that with someone else. That's my wish, that I
Yeah.
can, for myself and for other women, right?
Absolutely. And I help single moms that have overcome abusive relationships, or that have left toxic relationships and want to improve their finances and become financially independent or financially strong, because childhood trauma and trauma in relationships do affect your ability to manage your finances. So that's what I help mamas do. And I'm really excited that we are holding this series or doing this collaboration. Christina, I can't wait for our next talk. Thank you so much
Me
for this
too.
opportunity.
And I can't wait to talk about how it affects finances, because honestly, Rebecca, I have struggled with that. I relate to struggling with that. So yeah,
I mean, we
more.
all did. I was able to overcome it because I literally that I honed down and focused on it. So I can't wait for us to talk about what I did to become financially successful after all the stuff that I endured and what I learned about myself in the experience. So
I can't wait.
I guess that's a topic for next time.
Okay then. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, wait, hold on. Let's invite our viewers to watch our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're gonna put the links down below, and also join us our Facebook groups. I am the owner of the Financially Savvy Single Mamas group, and Christina, your group.
My group is Her Heart Repair, and we'll be posting it underneath this video on Facebook and within our Facebook groups. So who would ever like to join, please join us. We will be doing a lot of other lives like this and on YouTube.
Excellent. So until next time, bye y'all.
Bye-bye. Take care. Take care.
Take care.